For me, success has been redefined by the impact that I'm having on other people. And in mergers and acquisitions, I see the impact that I'm having on companies, on leaders within companies, helping them to reframe and frankly shift their mindset around what their leadership role is. Mergers and acquisitions are just rife with uncertainty. Variables change daily.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Welcome to this episode of Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited to have Jennifer Fondrevay here with us today. She is the founder and chief humanity officer of Day1 Ready, and also a friend of mine and a guide through my own transition process. I first met Jennifer when I was trying to figure out what life could look like past the corporate job and if I should be considering something else. We were introduced by a mutual friend. And that was really interesting. At the time, I never would have thought that we'd be together on this podcast, but it's really great that I'm doing what I'm doing now and you really helped me with that. And we were both also in big corporate transitions in a sense that my company was in the process of looking about being acquired. And that was the space that you were writing in HBR and consulting on, is for, having companies be ready for day one of mergers and acquisitions. So I'm really excited to have you here, Jennifer, a couple of years later, but really appreciate the guidance on the journey and appreciate you joining us on Life in Transition podcast. Most welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Although I worry that the term guide may be an overinflated description, I think I just benefited by being, maybe 5 years ahead of you in the stages of, writing a book and articles. But again, for me, it was a great common point that we both had a lot of focus already on transitions, both personal and professional.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, maybe it's only 5 years ahead, but in that transition point, 5 years is a very long time.
Very true. Good point.
I only just quit my job. It's only been not even 3 years ago. And the transition that I've been through since that time has been really, really heavy. So I really appreciate it. It definitely was a point. And I feel like I feel really happy with my transition and how it's going. And as they say, right, success has many parents, right? So it doesn't hurt for me to give credit to all the different people that really helped me through transition. But you were definitely one of them. And early on, when I was really struggling with what could life be like if I wasn't an executive officer in a public company, right?
Right.
And so I do really appreciate that. So jumping in, Jennifer, what do you feel like has been one of your most meaningful transitions, so highest impact? Maybe most difficult, but what's been something that's, when you look back on your life, that's been a really meaningful, impactful transition for you?
Well, it's interesting that we started off the conversation talking about just where you were at, and you asked me, how did you make that transition? Because truly pivoting from a corporate career, right, where I had been the head of marketing at several multi-billion-dollar companies, and taking a leap of faith into being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, frankly, and consultant. For me, that has turned out to be the most meaningful transition from a professional standpoint. And I say meaningful because I hadn't planned it. I didn't plan to do what I'm doing now. Never in a million years, having worked so hard in my corporate career to get to the chief marketing officer, level, having reached that, I thought, okay, I'm just going to continue to be a CMO at different companies. Like, this is my path. But then, having gone through 3 multi-billion-dollar merger and acquisition deals and seeing that they could be done better, or certainly, feeling, man, there's got to be a better way to do M&A. It was seeing that gap in the market, the lack of focus on the people piece is what really drove my desire to do something different, but I never imagined I'd be doing this. So that transition for me was a big leap of faith.
So, what gave you? I mean, I love that phrase, "a leap of faith." What gave you the courage to take that leap of faith, Jennifer?
I think I may have been on drugs. Uh, I I I honestly there's a part of me that thinks, "What the hell was I thinking?" Right?
Right?
But
But at the
it's
time, if you put yourself back in that space, I mean, what was it? Because that's, I think, I'm
absolutely.
everybody thinks about that. Everybody
Right.
thinks, "Is this it? Is this, should I try something else? Should I chase my dreams, whatever they are, or should I stick with the
Yeah,
path that's more trodden, the normal path?" I mean, it's not normal to get up to a CMO level, but it is normal if you get to that level to hold on to it for dear life,
absolutely,
right?
right? It can be a
So,
very rewarding job,
yeah, I mean, it can be
a
very
lot of
rewarding,
stress,
very interesting. It definitely pays very well. You definitely have a lot of prestige. You have a very nice identity,
right?
right? So, what was the impetus besides the market need, which, I mean, that for sure is part of it, but what gave you the courage to step away?
Well, there were two things that stand out when I look back. One was my initial foray into this was to write a book.
Okay.
I The book idea was in my head, and it was essentially at the time just a survivor's handbook, how to survive M&A.
Right. Right.
And I decided at the time it was more of a proof of concept to interview CEOs, CFOs, private equity, HR leaders, but a variety of people who had been involved in mergers and acquisitions who could contribute different perspectives. And frankly, for my own justification, I wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one who had experienced some of the things I had gone
Okay, so
through in all
before
of
you
my
wrote
M&A.
your experience, you wanted to validate it, basically,
Yep,
check it with a lot of other experienced people and make sure your perspective
great. I
was
wanted
whole,
proof of concept.
right?
And it was several CEO conversations where, as I was talking to these CEOs and they were giving me personal stories, things that they had learned from M&A, what they would have done differently. And they were always coming back to the people piece, the culture piece, the change management piece. And I had one CEO in particular say, "Well, what are you doing besides the book? Like, this book is really important, but how are you going to get it into the hands of people who need it most?" And I remember looking at him and saying, "Well, do you know how hard it is to write a book?" Like, that was my first thought. Like, "You write a book, buddy." But, he was
Since
absolutely
you're
right.
only doing this, Jennifer, why don't you do something else?
But he was right, and I'm embarrassed as a marketing executive that in my head at the time, I was like, "Well, I'll work with a publisher and I'll get the book out there." But I also knew upon reflection, and he wasn't the only one, he just was the one who was the most
In your
candid
face.
about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I thought, he's absolutely right. Like, if it's just a book, it won't have the impact that I want it to. And so that was the seed for, you need to do something more than just the book. And that's essentially what he said. You need to consult
right, right.
companies and leaders to practice what you preach in this book. The second, I would say, point that really drove home for me to take that leap of faith was in the summer of 2017. I thought I had breast cancer. Thankfully, I didn't. But going through that summer, and for a variety of reasons, the results kept getting delayed. And I remember sitting in the waiting room and calling my husband and saying, "Man, if this prognosis turns out to be positive, I feel that I don't want my legacy to just be about being a CMO."
Mm,
And
mm,
as much as I had worked towards that, I just I was in the middle of researching my book, and I was really getting excited about the stories that people were sharing with me, and the fact that I believed this book could help. And I'd had the
right,
conversation with the CEO, and I'd started to think about, what would this be, this business of mine, if I'm wrapped more than, just this book around it. And I really think that thankfully, I didn't have cancer, but that forced me to really think about what I wanted my legacy to be, and and I would say drove my desire, um, to take that leap of faith. And I will give a lot of credit to my husband because I said to him, because he said, I think, honey, you need to do this. I've never seen you more passionate and excited about something.
Right.
And my response to him was, I said, okay, but let's just recognize that we're not just going to tighten the belt. We're going to need to go down some pant sizes, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So, and
Right.
his response was, we'll make it work. We will do whatever
Right.
we need to in
Right.
order for you to pursue this. So I would highlight, I guess the third piece is you need to have a partner willing to support you as you make this transition, because it is particularly, a transition at this stage in your career where you're starting all over again.
Right.
You're learning some things over, you're tapping into some skills that maybe you haven't used in a
Right.
while,
Right. I'm
and
resonating with all those comments for sure. Yeah.
yeah, so you have to have a partner who supports you, and says, let's do what we need to in order for you to give this your all.
So you had you had a great career going, but you also had been through enough hell with M&A to realize that there was a hole and something needed to be done, and you had the desire to write a book about it after the proof of concept.
Yeah.
And then you had this sort of wake up call, sort of flash forward to the end of your life. If my life were to end earlier,
Yeah.
what do I want to make sure I don't regret not having done? And I know that's
Yes.
sort of an awkward sentence, but I think it's actually really important. I was on a call just before this with my midlife transition mastermind group. And there was a military officer there, and he was talking about that in the planning phase, that it's really important to think about what happens if you do X, what doesn't happen if you do X, and
Right.
what happens if you don't do X,
Yeah.
and what doesn't happen if you don't do X.
Yep.
And I never thought of it, all four of those questions like that before. But so that was really, and I think it's a really, really valid thing, is to think about like, okay, looking back, if my life were to end now, would I want to continue in my CMO roles, or would I really want to pour myself into this book and trying to make a difference in this way? So I
And
think
for me too, what I would say, I had never had as a goal to write a book, which
interesting.
sounds, cocky. Now, well, I just wrote a book. I mean, it's a process to write a book. The book idea just wouldn't go away. I had it in my head after my first acquisition, and I started to think about it after the second acquisition, where the first acquisition I had been acquired. The second acquisition, I was part of the change management or change agent group brought in to help the new company adapt. But I was now on the other side, and I knew how they felt, right? The team I inherited had been acquired.
Right.
And so that second acquisition showed me, okay, what I experienced in the first one, now I know what it feels like. It's made me a better leader for them because I know what they're thinking and feeling.
Right.
And then the third acquisition, at that point, I thought, okay, I've got to write this book because I had more ideas and I was seeing patterns and ways, I would say low-hanging fruit for how leaders could be better and smarter
Right.
during that transition. But what's fascinating to me is the book idea. I mean, my book idea, it's got a Spotify playlist, it's got illustrations, like all of that came, I don't want to say in a vision, but they were just ideas that kept popping into my head. And I thought, I've got to write this book or I'm going to go mad.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love that you're willing to put that out there, because I believe that too, that there's, I heard this, it comes from St. Thomas, but it's quoted by Stephen Pressfield that says, if we bring forth what is within us, it will save us.
Yes.
And if we don't bring forth what is within us, it will destroy us.
Yeah.
Right? So you just said that if I didn't bring this
Yeah.
book forward, I feel like I was going to go mad.
Yeah.
And I love that you were willing then to follow that, right? Regardless of what it looks like. And yes, you had to get different pant sizes. The belt didn't even, wouldn't even grab your budget anymore without your income, right? But I think about the lady that wrote Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
Have you read her book, Big Magic?
I have. Yep.
I don't know if maybe you were the one that recommended it to me.
Right.
Somebody recommended it to me.
The genius tapped me on the head, and I was thankfully ready to receive.
Yeah, and her idea that ideas are sort of having their own consciousness, and if you wouldn't act on it, it's going to go tap on somebody else's shoulder. And I have
Yep.
no idea if that's scientifically true or not, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So I applaud
I
you
I
for
I heard her talk about it, and I read the book, and I thought that's what happened to me. There's
yeah.
no other explanation I have for, the 10 personas that I wrote about, having them illustrated, bringing them to life. Um, to this day, I'm kind of shocked that at least I had the idea, and, and that I was able to bring it to life in that way.
Yeah, no, well, congratulations, and that's awesome. So really, it was those two things. It was seeing a strong need mixed with this. Maybe it's three or four things mixed with this reflection from the end of life, putting yourself forward to end of life, and thinking, how do I want to be remembered? What do I want to make sure I don't regret not trying? At least I would say even doing, but at that point, it's even trying. You don't know even that you're going to do it, and then it's having this persistent idea that is really keeps coming back to you, and a supportive, I'll say, environment. In this case, your partner, your husband, that
Yeah,
said, yeah, go for it. We'll figure out how to manage the budget without your income for a while, and give you a chance to run this process.
right. The one other thing that I would add, because you and I talked about this a bit too, when you take that leap of faith, one of the other things that can um, that you can struggle with when you have kids is, what is this going to do for my kids, right? If particularly, as I joked, we were not just tightening the belt, but going down some pant sizes. And at the time that I did this, my one son was in junior high, my daughter was just starting high school. And I remember my daughter saying, "Mom, you're present now. Like you are here, and you are such a great example of someone who's willing to change and pursue something that they're passionate about." So for her, and I hadn't even thought about this, but I was a better role model of changing my career path. I don't want to say midstream, but just showing that that was possible.
Mm,
And I was so
mm,
struck by her saying that I was
mm.
a better role model for her, because I'd always been tired and I was traveling a lot. And I thought, well, that was a requirement. That was part of my job.
Right.
That's what you sign up for when you
What's
become a
C-suite do? Yeah.
C-suite executive. And to hear her say, this is an example to me of what's possible, was really,
Mm,
I think,
mm.
for me, was the reward of, okay, I can do this, and my family, not just my husband, but my family's behind me.
Right. Now that's awesome, and I think it's of course, the first thing we go to is, well, we need to provide well for our families, so we
Right.
need to make money. But there's a lot other ways to provide for, to guide, and to be a light and inspiration for than just money. And of
Yes.
course, you need to have that to a certain level. But I love that's what your daughter said, and gave you permission to do that, and not just permission, but support in that way. And I
Right.
think it's really true. That now, if she's in a situation when she's 35 and making by then, whatever, $1 million a year, but she
Yeah.
feels a tap on the shoulder with some inspiration to do something else, then she'll not be afraid to do that,
Right.
right? Based on your
Yeah.
example.
And I hadn't realized how important that is. Particularly, I feel like kids in high school now, they have so much pressure on them. They almost, at least, and I don't think my daughter's unique in this. I think they all think they've got to have figured out what their life's plan is
Right,
at
right.
this stage. And so for her to see me go, well, I thought this was my plan, but now I've got a completely different plan.
Right. And that's okay, and it doesn't invalidate the first plan either at
Right.
all, right?
Yep.
It's necessary to climb that mountain, then to climb down the mountain, right? And then find something else to climb, and that's perfectly fine, right?
Yeah.
No, that's great. What do you think, looking back now on that transition that was started in 2017, you said, so we're, call it 7 years in.
Yeah.
What is one of the biggest things that you've learned?
God, I feel like I've learned a lot. Um,
Which by
and
itself is incredibly rewarding, because as human beings, we love to learn. We may not like it, we don't like the discomfort that comes with it, but we love to learn. So
yeah.
that's by itself is a big thing if you've learned a lot.
Well, and for me, I think I hadn't thought about it until you asked it, but and I suspect you've had the same lesson. When you're in a corporate career, you are maniacally focused on the objectives of your company, whatever those are. You tune everything out. At least I don't think I'm unique in that.
No,
You're
yeah,
just it's
I
all about
definitely,
that.
I'll share a quick story on that just to tell you how out of control that is. Like when I came back from being president of Autoleaf China after 3 years over
Mhm.
there, I tried to find my 401k. So this is my main, they didn't have a pension plan. This was my main retirement account, right? And I'm
Yep.
now, whatever I was, 40 something years old, and I couldn't even find it. And I called HR and I said, I'm trying to log in and I can't find my 401k. They said, oh, we moved the provider 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
was so maniacally focused on the results of the company, I didn't even know where my retirement savings was for 2 years, which
Yep.
is insane. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
understand. And I'm sure I'm not the only one and you're not the only one. A lot of people, it's like blinders on. We're doing the job that we're paid a lot of money to do to execute for this company.
Right. And so because when I initially entertained, like as I said, all I was planning to do was write a book. I
Right.
was
Right.
researching for the book, I was interviewing CEOs, but I was also interviewing for my next CMO role, right? So those two things that happened, the CEO saying, "What are you doing besides the book?" And me thinking, "Okay, I may have cancer. Is this?" I was straddling both, interviewing for next CMO, researching for book. And when I finally took that leap of faith and said, "Okay, I'm gonna go all in. I'm writing this book and I'm building a business around it." I had no idea of all these, like, I will say, cottage industry of solopreneurs and consultants and, like, I was a marketing executive, so I thought I knew digital social media, but I didn't know it from the context of being a person building their own business, and how many people exist out there to help you succeed in that. I was blown away by how much is out there to help you. I think we benefit now from the gig economy having exploded, but it was astonishing to me. So my biggest first lesson was, wow, there's a lot of support systems out here if you're smart,
And I
and
guess
you
that made my question for you. Like, how do you know even, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, but how do you know what to do yourself and what to do, and how do you know what's the right person? I mean, I'm still stuck in that stuff right now, actually. And I wouldn't say stuck, but I'm still moving through all of that
yeah,
stuff right now. But how did you have a sense? Like, there's all this stuff out there, but, before you had a
you
team
do
for that,
well, you
right?
know what? You do what you did with me, right? You tell people, "This is what I'm interested in, here's what I'm trying to do," and they connect you, right?
All
You and
right.
I got
Right.
connected via page,
Yep.
and you interview people. How did you do it? What have you learned? What are resources that you've found useful? What would you say is a waste of time? And you just keep doing that, and the more people you get connected to, the more it comes into focus. Okay, this is what I want to do, and here's how I'm going to do it.
Right.
And I've always been a very curious person. I love learning. I'm constantly feeling like I'm I'd never know everything. Like I'm
Right.
not
Yeah, for sure.
confident of that,
Yeah.
but just wanting to learn and benefit from other people's experiences. And so for me, the 3 years I spent researching the book, and when I decided to drop interviewing for another CMO role and go all in on this, then all of your energy is going towards that. And, for me, the biggest benefit was meeting people who could teach me, "Here's what to do, here's what's not to
Mm,
do, and
mm,
here's how to consider it."
mm.
You have to be smart enough to know what works for you, because 'cause you're
Right.
gonna be bombarded by people who will tell you, "Oh, don't waste your
I
time
got
with
the
this," or,
solution. Yeah.
yeah, "Do this." Um, you have to go with what works for you and what feels right, but being open to that and having a curiosity and willingness to learn for me was the key lesson. You can start, particularly if you've been a C-suite executive, you can think, "Oh,
I know something.
I already know a lot." And then you
Right.
start all over and you go, "I know nothing."
Right. Right. Yeah, no, they keep
You
that
have
open
to
mindset.
swallow your pride and put your ego aside.
But I guess, I mean, quite frankly, if you're letting go of a C-suite job in a multi-billion-dollar corporation to do something else, you're already putting your ego aside
Yeah,
because otherwise you would stay there with all the trappings of money and power and position and prestige that come with that.
yeah,
So,
oh
but it's
yeah.
an ongoing process. I know I can vouch for that myself. Like, I can't figure out even what email to use now. It's like, so it's an ongoing process. But it will get there. No, I appreciate that. Looking back on it now, Jennifer, what do you think you would do differently? Like, if you could go back and tell your 2017 self something with the perspective you have from a 2024 self, what would you tell yourself? What would you do differently?
You
How
know
would you
what's
manage the
interesting? And I
transition?
actually wrote a New Year's Eve post about this. Um, and what I said is, if my future self gave my current self advice, I probably wouldn't have listened. Like some listen,
All right. Yeah.
you just have to learn the hard way. And there's a part of me that says, and had my future self told me what was going to happen, I might not have taken the leap of faith.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah, because it's more
So,
difficult also than you thought. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. And because it is scary, but part of the scariness is the uncertainty of it. And I think for me, the most important, and I did my TEDx talk about this, right? Embracing uncertainty. You can do that when you have confidence in yourself, right? When you think, okay, whatever comes my way, I can weather this. I know my value. I know my talents, and I've just got to focus on that. And by doing that, I for me, the key part of it was the more you commit to that, and people see your passion and your purpose, then they support you. As I said in my TEDx, they start to put a brick in your path. So different people along the way help you pursue the path that you were meant to, that you didn't maybe know. And for me, that was such a critical piece of it, is once you make that commitment and people see your passion and purpose, uh, they support you in ways that you never expected. At least that's been my case. And I know in talking to you, it sounds as though you're having similar experience, right? It's almost shocking. Wow. People come from out of nowhere, to help you in your pursuit.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So being that it's been tougher and it's been a longer road and uncertain as you've gone along, would you, like, looking back, would you still have made that choice? Or do you think you would have chosen to stay as a CMO?
I would. Here's what it required, though. Previously, I would have defined success, um, as what the path that I was on, right? The CMO role, the fame that comes with that, as you said, particularly when you're a CMO, right? You go to conferences, you speak at different things, all of those, the trappings of that. Uh, I've redefined, and thankfully, it's because I've had a lot of great advisors. For me, success has been redefined by the impact that I'm having on other people. And in
Mm,
mergers and acquisitions,
mm,
I see the impact that I'm having
mm.
on companies, on leaders within companies, helping them to reframe and frankly shift their mindset around what their leadership role is. Mergers and acquisitions are just rife with uncertainty.
Yeah,
Variables
yeah.
change daily.
And with
And
failure, to be honest, as well.
yeah, and for me, my success, I see it every time I'm talking to a CEO. I coach CEOs and CFOs, C-suite leadership on how to navigate this, how to be smart about it, how to lead better. It's a different toolkit. And same with frontline leaders. And for me, redefining what success is isn't all just on the finances. It's not just the
Right,
bank account. Now,
right.
granted, absolutely that's important, but
Absolutely, yeah.
I think as a solopreneur, you don't keep doing what you're doing unless you see your success in the people who you touch and affect. And particularly when my book came out, I was a first time author. My book's on M&A, right? It's not like people are
Right.
racing to Barnes and Noble to pick up a book on mergers and acquisitions.
Racing to the Harvard Business Review, maybe, but not to Barnes and Noble. Yeah.
No, and so the fact that I have over 100 reviews, and people have written in those reviews. One gentleman said, "This book saved my marriage. My wife was going through a merger and acquisition. I didn't know how to help and support her. I read your book. I had her read it. It helped her." Like those are the things that
Yeah.
keep you going. So I think for me, a critical part of it was redefining what success looks like.
No, I love that. And I think that, especially for those of us, and not everybody listening to this podcast, but a lot of us are in midlife transition. I think that's also really important, right? There's a certain, I don't know, foundational part of the early career that is about, you got to make some money and you got to get some financial stability and you got to make some name for yourself. That's true. And I don't want to take away from anybody that's climbing that
Absolutely.
mountain right now. But if you're lucky enough to make some roads there, then you have options. So you can come off that mountain and you can walk through a valley for a while and take some reflection and then say, what does success mean for the second half? Right.
Right.
I think I hate the word retirement, because I
Right.
don't think I think it's the picture that it gins up of, like you're someone that's added a ton of value and you have a ton of connections and community and in business. And then you're going to go sit on the beach or play golf for the rest of your life at 65. That's what people die when they're 67 or 68, because
Yeah.
they find that there's not purpose in that. Right. So I love what you've said, that you've redefined your success here in the second half more along the terms of purpose. Of course, you still have to make money. You still have to pay the bills, but it's
Right.
more the impact that you have on others, which
Yes.
in the end of the day, life is much more measured about what you give than what you get. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's beautiful and very well said, Jennifer. So if I answer that question for you, then, that would you have made the change? You absolutely still would have made the change, even though it was more difficult, even though it was bumpier, longer process, et cetera. But you
Yeah.
still definitely would have made the change.
I would have, because I know I've had success already, and now what is fascinating for me is the path is undefined. I'm continue to create the path, which is really scary, but at the same time exhilarating. And
Exactly.
I'm a planner.
Makes
I
you
mean,
feel alive.
went to graduate school, went into advertising, then I shifted into marketing, this whole M&A thing, particularly because I suck at math, like it was certainly not a pivot I expected. But now that I'm in it, and I'm creating a completely, unique aspect to the offering. And I shouldn't say completely unique. I have found other, you know, they call them human capital advisors. I love how everything gets labeled. I was like, it's people. We work on the people part, but whatever. Let's just call it human capital. It sounds like an asset. And for me, being in the role that I'm in now, it's cool because I'm defining the path daily, and I'm just thankful that people have seen value in what I do and want to contribute to that path.
Right. And I think it's great. I mean, when you say contribute there's two things that come to mind. One is contribute financially as a client, but then also what
Yes.
you said a minute ago, that people actually are going to put bricks in your path for you as well. So you don't even have to build the path by yourself. And that's something that I know when I thought about making that, to leaving the sort of safety, if you will, even though that's a misnomer, but the safety, the perceived safety, financial safety anyway, of the corporate world,
Hmm.
that I was thinking I'd have to do it all by myself. And I love the image that you've planted in my head now of, yeah, we're walking this path. We don't know where it's going to lead. We know the process we want to follow. We know the kind of person we want to be. We know the kind of value that we want to show up, but that other
Right.
people are also going to be placing bricks in the path for us to walk on. We don't have to do it all by ourselves.
Right.
Is also a pretty cool visual that you've given me. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Um,
Well, I referenced it in my TEDx. I talk about, getting clarity. You can take that leap of faith, but what gives you the confidence is getting clear on your talent, also knowing where to put your effort, where to put your energy, and just building on what we were talking about. When people see you putting in your effort and your energy and being passionate, they start to help you. They want to be part of that. And same with your attitude, maintaining a positive attitude, because you're going to hit a lot of resistance. Yeah, people who will say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And then also when you're carving a completely new and different path, you're going to wonder, what am I doing, right? So
Yeah.
maintaining a positive attitude through all those ebbs and flows, for me, I call it my TEA framework, but I keep
What does that stand for, the TEA?
talent, effort, attitude.
Oh, great. Yep.
Made it easy.
Have a cup of
T.
tea. Have a
Exactly.
cup of tea.
But for me, that more than anything, because our energy is finite. You need to know where to put your effort, and I have learned very quickly, particularly in this stage, having a positive attitude. People don't people. It's not just people want to work with you when you're positive, but they want to be with you. And the more that they see you not getting phased by things and just saying, "Okay, we'll just make it work." It's critical to your success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious, like, where do you think your life would be today if you hadn't made that choice? Like, if you go back to 2017 and you decide, you know what, I hear this knocking, I hear this, but I'm going to ignore it and I'm going to stay in CMO role. Where do you think your life would be today?
Well, the unfortunate part, I sound so smart and so self-aware now, Art. I will
Well, you
confess.
do, Jennifer, that's for sure. But
But I confess, if we were to go back, um, I would have burned out.
Mhm.
No,
And
no
what does
doubt.
that look like to you? What does that look like when you say I would have burned out? What would that look like in your daily life?
Uh, I'd have a different relationship with my kids, I think. Had I continued to stay on, and this is again not a knock. I loved my career. I was maniacally focused on being successful in it. Um, but that you put your, at least I did. I put my health
Yeah,
aside more times
raising
than I
my
should
hand. Me
have,
too. Yeah.
and I think stepping off of that made me realize how lucky I was that those health issues were blips and not permanent, um, and that it could have been a different scenario. And in response to your question, I think, man, I think I would have just continued to ignore those signals, and my health would have gotten worse. And I'm somebody who's always felt relatively healthy, uh, but, yeah, I ignored a lot of signals, and I'm just thankful that, at a certain point, I would love to say I was so self-aware back then, but it was more just, again, the book idea that wouldn't go away, and in the process of writing that book, it opened my eyes to another path that I didn't even know existed.
Right. And I think it's really interesting because, I started asking about the question about what gave you the courage to make that change. But now listening to you about where your life would be anyway, and then reflecting a little bit on my own life and transition as well, professional transition. Like, in some ways, you also didn't maybe know it at the point, but in some ways you didn't even have a choice because at some point, if
Mhm.
you burn out enough, like my
Yeah,
health got to a point where I had to stop. Like, I was in bed for eight to 12 weeks where I couldn't get out of bed. I
yeah,
couldn't do my job. Luckily, I could sort of hide behind it at the time because it was COVID, so I didn't have to get on planes, right?
yeah,
But at some point, you don't have a choice. You're either going to die
yeah,
or you're going to stop and take stock, right? So I think that's an important, like, I'm speaking to myself, but also all of you guys listening out there. Like, if you're thinking about something, if there's something like a book idea or something else that's tapping on your shoulder, don't don't. It's not as big a risk as you think, because if you're going in an unsustainable way, that's going to stop anyway. And you're either going to have to get yourself healthy first, and then you can start on your idea if it's still there, if it hasn't moved on to somebody else in Elizabeth
right.
Gilbert speak. Um, so you're starting from a little bit from a negative place. So I don't know, I just had that realization. I just wanted to share it. So thank you for shining that light on that, because it's really, maybe isn't as big a risk as we think. Because if you're on a track to burn out, you're going to stop anyhow at some point,
Right.
because you're going to be forced to because of health, right? Or you're going to die in your position, which is not, like, I don't think anybody's, excited about that. So no, thank you. I think and I really appreciate the authenticity there too, Jennifer, about where you think you would be.
Well,
Um,
and the other thing, it came up again in the conversation that I had with my daughter, because I was traveling so much and I thought I was being a great role model. I thought, particularly as a female,
yeah,
I
and
am
you're
showing my daughter what
yeah,
success can look like when you
right,
commit.
right,
And it was thankfully in that conversation where she said, I feel like I now get to know you, mom. Like you were a great role model for sure of what's possible, but now you're present. And I thought I had done a pretty good job of compartmentalizing, work is work but when I'm home, I'm home. But you can be home physically and not mentally. And so her making that comment, um, I would say just helped confirm for me I'd made the right choice. I was on the right path, even though I wasn't sure what that path looked like.
right, or
Uh,
what the outcome of that path would be.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, and I think about this a lot because it's so counterintuitive, counter to what maybe I shouldn't say counterintuitive, counter to what my training was and what my success was in the first half of my life. Is
Yes.
that comment from it's in the book, The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life, where he talks about that I don't know where I'm going, but I know how I'm going to get there.
Hmm.
It's like the opposite of what we learn, in
Yes.
business school and in the first half of career, where I know where I'm going. I don't care how I'm going to get there, but I know where I'm going. Right? He's
Right.
saying, no, I know the process. Like I don't know where the lion is, so I don't know where I'm
Yes.
going, but I know the process. I'm going to follow one track and I'm going to follow another, and I'm going to stay tuned in. And I'm going to stay aware. Back to your comment about awareness, right? And then I don't know where it's going to take me, but I know how I'm going to show up along the way.
Yeah.
And it's a very different way. I mean, my daughter's 18, my youngest, and she talks about, her and I have very open, very good relationship, very tight. And we're a little tough on each other. Sometimes she's like, yeah, it was the bad dad and the now dad. He's like, yeah, but that was when you were a bad dad, like which I was just not, not present, right? I mean, and
Right.
as you said, like I was traveling, say half the time,
Yeah.
and then I was preoccupied, and that's where it's even a bigger issue. Is even if I was traveling half the time, if I was really present when I was home, probably would have been still a good dad. And I was checking all the boxes. I mean, I was checking all the boxes of what a good dad should do, but not being present. And maybe doing it for the wrong reasons. She can feel the difference now than 3 years ago for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm really, and all my kids can, but she's maybe, I don't know, the luckiest that she was still in formation, where
Yeah.
the two older
Yeah.
boys are a little bit less in formation at that time. So I think that's really important. Um, if there's one tool that you would give to our listeners to handle transition, to
Hmm.
make the most of what life gives us, that they can take action on now, like one thing that they could really take action on and apply today, what would that be, Jennifer, from what you've learned now with this 7 years of perspective and all the research you've done and everything else?
What's fascinating you asked this question because that's what led to me doing a TEDx talk, right? Because for me, the advice is to embrace the uncertainty. I've, I found for me as someone who always thought, okay, I do this work and then I'll bring certainty. I do this work and then I'll bring certainty. And when you pivot, because I'm thinking a lot of your listeners are people contemplating or already in the transition.
Right?
If you're constantly thinking, okay, I work towards this and this will bring certainty, and I work towards this, it's a very different scenario when you
Before we
are.
go further, can I interrupt you for a second? Because I want to so
Yeah.
you said, if I do this, then it'll bring certainty. But what's the purpose of having certainty? Like, what's behind that? Because nobody says, oh, I mean, some people, I want to have certainty, but what is the bigger thing that's behind the certainty? What are you telling yourself at that point? If I do this, I'll bring certainty, and certainty will bring me what?
Well, and I should say I'm speaking for myself, so
Yeah, absolutely.
others
That's
can
what this is. Yeah.
determine or not. But in my prior career, right, I do this work, I could get promoted, and I get more responsibility. I do this work, and then I move up, and I maybe have now people I manage. Like there tends to be a path that you figure out, regardless of what
So the
company you're
certainty
in.
would bring you more rewards, more material,
Correct.
more business, more rewards, more responsibility.
Yep.
And what were you hoping that that more responsibility would bring you? Like if you take it one step further, like then, so the certainty brings you, I do this, I'm certain that I'm going to get promoted.
Right.
What is
You
that
move
going to bring
up,
you? You
right?
move
And
up?
again, in my original path, you move up, you have bigger teams, bigger budgets. You are then somebody who is a talent worth pursuing, right? So you get poached or recruited from other companies. Like it's all about, okay, I do this, this leads to that. I do this, this leads to that. You kind of know what that looks like, and it has a level of certainty to it.
Absolutely. But it's all in that case, it's all about the outcome, right?
Hmm.
I've told myself that somehow to have a good life or a happy life or whatever it is, I need to have X, and this is the path to get to X. I go through
Yes,
this. I have the certainty that I'm going to get promoted. Promoted is going to bring more opportunity, more prestige, more money, and that's going to bring me happiness or fulfillment.
right.
Okay.
And
So
then,
that's what you mean by having certainty. And now you're saying, guess what? There's not any certainty.
correct. And I don't think yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't think I'm the person that's not new news, but I think it's when you embrace that reality that you aren't going to have certainty, but that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's an opportunity for you to create the path. And that can be really not only rewarding but fulfilling because now you're directing the path. And for me, that was a massive epiphany.
Right.
It just was, oh
So there's
wow.
freedom to build your own path to and the excitement that comes with that. So you said the one thing, the one tool you would give is to embrace uncertainty.
Yes. So
How
it's
do
a
you do that?
mindset. I think it's
How
not
do you
even
do
a
that? Because I
tool,
don't
it's
want
a
to dig into that for a
mindset.
second. How do you do that? So if I'm here and I'm an engineer, I'm talking for myself now. I always do. I'm an engineer and a business guy, and I like spreadsheets and I like certainty and I like if then statements. And now I'm thinking about making this change. How do I make myself okay with uncertainty? What's the practice? What's the step? We were talking about, how we're going to show
Right.
up. What do I do to do that?
So that's what I was alluding to before. That's part of the TEDx talk I gave. For me, it was the TEA, right? Getting really clear on what are my true talents. What is it that I am in flow. I love it. I can do it for hours. You wouldn't even have to pay me, but it's really getting clear on what your talents are, knowing where to put your effort, right? Prioritizing where you put your energy.
So where you can get return, where do you have joy? Where can you get return, and what you should outsource or let somebody else handle?
Absolutely. And that
Okay.
that can take a bit of time because
Yep.
particularly I will say as a marketing executive, that was probably one of the harder things for me to realize I don't need to do all of the marketing, right?
Right. Right.
But you learn at your own pace. And then lastly, the attitude piece of it. I am 100% convinced that major part of my success and what I'm doing now is that I haven't let the downward parts, the valleys, keep me from my purpose. And when people see you have a positive attitude and you have a passion around what you're doing, they support you. They want to be around you. They wish to help you. You and I have that connection.
And I agree. And if I'm somebody that, let's say I'm somebody that hasn't had in history, hasn't been known for a positive attitude, how do I manifest that? What does that look like? Like, what do I do in my daily life, in my minute by minute life to generate, to hold, to attain a positive attitude?
So for me, I think of two questions in particular. The first one is when I feel myself getting a negative attitude, right? And so I'll use a scenario, right? Like the airlines. Probably how many times you've been bumped off a flight or it was late or whatever, right? And you just feel yourself. And I think to myself, what is triggering this for me, right? What is it that's behind this? And a month from now, is this going to make a difference? If I have a negative attitude in this moment, who is that helping? No one. And so I apply that in every time where I can feel myself starting to get a negative attitude, it doesn't mean that I haven't had my fair share of arguments with the airlines, but when I feel myself starting to get a negative attitude, I try and identify what really is the trigger behind this attitude. Is it what's happening here in the moment, or is this a buildup of other things? And really to think about what is all of that? Why am I feeling this way? Because the more I peel back, the more I realize this really is irrelevant. In a grand
Right.
scheme of things, this
Right.
is not worth me getting all worked up
So
about.
what's really triggering me? Is it really this, or is it something else, accumulation, or I'm tired or whatever?
Yep.
And is it, is it what was there was a second one. Then there was what is it does it
The
help
second
anybody?
one is like just thinking future forward, a month from now, a year
Oh,
from
is it
now.
gonna
Will I
matter?
even
Like, what's the
remember
relevance of this?
this?
Like,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of the things that maybe are the biggest challenges in the future, we'll look at it as the good old days. "Oh, remember when we had that crazy trip and everything fell
Yep.
apart?" And you look at it with a sort of fondness. Why not have that now?
Yeah.
So look
Oh,
forward, and
absolutely.
is it really that negative a thing, or can you be lighthearted with it? And then I love your last one, which is me having a negative attitude gonna help the situation at all? Right? And
Right.
even if you're fighting with the airlines, which you can do without having a negative attitude, right?
Yes.
Is the negative attitude gonna help you? No, it's not. They're gonna
Nope.
tell you to piss off, right?
Yep.
And if you have a
Yeah.
positive attitude, then they may break the rule and put you on the other flight, even though you're not as high
Yep.
ranked as the guy that has a negative attitude.
Absolutely. That formula has been more successful for me, than any other thing. And so the future focus part of it helps you look back at the moment you're in and go, "This is irrelevant." Like, I'm making a big deal out of this, but in the future, I won't even remember this. So let's just put it in context.
Right. Oh, I love that. Okay. No, that's very concrete and I really appreciate it. So really, the number one tool, which is a lot of things inside, is to have a cup of tea, right? And to really look at, where's your talent? Where should you put your effort? And then to make sure you maintain a positive attitude, and you have some very specific and concrete examples of how to do that,
Right,
which I
and for
really
me, it was
appreciate.
all 3 of those things combined that enabled me to embrace uncertainty, to not be constantly
Right.
chasing certainty, but being
Right.
willing to go, "Okay, I can weather whatever comes my way."
Right. And that, I think, is the number one thing in all of life, actually.
Yes,
Because if you have a confidence that whatever comes your way, it doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to be bad, you're not making your well being dependent on some certain if then equation. It's like
right.
whatever comes up, I can handle it.
Yeah,
I'll find a way to have enough money. I'll find a way to fix this relationship. Even if I lose somebody really close to me, I'm strong enough inside and I'll connect to other people around me that I'll still be okay. Like
yeah,
that's where, and it's interesting. It's the opposite of certainty, except the only thing you're certain about is that whatever comes up, that you've got whatever the inner strength, the relationships, the connection, the faith in order to handle it.
yep. And you
And
know
that,
what's interesting? And I think too, it sounds as though you've had this experience, Art. You might think your talent is one thing. We tend to think our talent is what we excelled at in school, what
right,
our job description was. I have learned later in life that I have a talent for writing, which I
right,
never thought, right? In
right,
marketing, it was like 3 bullets. What's the
right,
headline?
right, right. What's the story? Yeah.
And I have had so many people say, "I love your writing." And I keep
Mm.
thinking, "You do?" Like, it's just astonishing,
So
you
part
know?
of that T is also listening openly to feedback of others, to honest feedback of others, where maybe
Yeah.
you can't quite see yourself, but they can be a mirror for you.
And being really open to exploring what is your real talent, right? You're a great podcast interviewer, right? You're in flow. It's just I bet you didn't even know
I
you'd be so
didn't.
good.
And I thought I was a good author, and I'm not sure that I'm a good writer, but I get a lot of feedback about podcasting, and I love doing it as well. So it's probably part of, it's not probably, it is my main capital T right now,
Yeah.
because I feel like it is a talent. I didn't even know what podcasting was when I was in school. It didn't exist,
Yep.
right? So no, that's
Yeah.
really good. Thank you. So last question, Jennifer. You've mentioned this a lot of times, but where can people find out more about you? Where can they? Where? What's the title of your TED Talk? Where can they watch that? Where can they find out more about you? You've had a very interesting experience. I think is going to be useful to a lot of people. Where can they find out more?
Thank you. I 2 places. I try and keep my platform reach really focus. I think we've got way too many platforms we need to keep
Yeah,
track of.
for sure.
So thankfully, I am the only Jennifer J. Fondrevay on the planet. There is no other one. And I'm happy to declare that. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer J. Fondrevay, and my website, same thing, jenniferjfondrevay.com. I write a lot on LinkedIn. It's not all M&A.
Yeah, no, you
So
have some other interesting articles as well on LinkedIn. Yeah.
so for people who think, "Oh, I don't wanna follow some lady who just writes about M&A," I
And
write.
what's the title of your book? It's the name of your company as well, right?
No, the title of my book is Now What? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions, and, I credit actually the illustrator of my book, Jeff York, when we were meeting, because we were riffing on different titles, and he said, "Well, what did your team say to you all the time during M&As? Like, what was a repeated thing that you kept experiencing?" I was like, someone would come into my office, and I'd be like, "Now what?" Right? Because things just kept changing. And he's
Right,
like, "That's it.
right. There you
That's
go.
the
Nice.
title."
And that's available everywhere on your website, but also everywhere else, Amazon and Barnes& and
Yes.
Noble and wherever.
Yep.
And then you've also I know from following you on LinkedIn, you also have had a couple of really interesting HBR articles, Harvard Business Review,
I have, and I'm now a Forbes contributor, which I'm really excited
as
about,
well. Cool.
that I focus on the unique leadership, skills, both mindset, and skills that you need to bring for uncertainty. I focus on mergers and acquisitions, but it's applicable to all leaders facing uncertainty.
Absolutely, which is only thing maybe certain is there's more and more uncertainty. Um,
Yes.
and then what's the title of your TED Talk as well? People, I mean, they can find it on your website, but if they just want to find it on TED, what's the title of your TED Talk?
Create opportunity in an uncertain world.
Create opportunity in an uncertain world. Cool.
And it was TEDx Wilmette. I did it in
Okay.
April of 2022.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing so many useful tools and honest reflection on your journey about the ups and downs and sidewayses and the learnings that you've had from it. I really think a lot of our listeners will find this very useful. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you having this podcast answers one of those questions you asked me, right? How do you take this leap of faith? Well, one is listening to podcasts like this, where you hear how other people did it, what they did, how they pursued it, lessons that they learned. That for me was a big part of my data gathering at the beginning of this journey.
Awesome. No, I agree. I did a lot of podcast digestion myself, and I also think this is a good one for people to get that information. I've had that feedback a lot. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
You bet.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.